Welcome to our show, Immigration Briefing. Today, we have some compelling stories that highlight the ongoing struggles and complexities surrounding immigration issues. First up, around 1,000 passionate marchers gathered outside the home of border czar Tom Homan in Sackets Harbor, voicing their support for a detained family. The community rallied together, showcasing their solidarity and demanding the return of the children who were taken during a controversial raid. It's a powerful reminder of how deeply immigration policies impact families and communities. In another significant development, a federal judge has ordered the Trump administration to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland man who was mistakenly deported to a dangerous prison in El Salvador. The judge criticized the government's handling of the case, highlighting the potential risks Abrego Garcia faces back home. This ruling raises important questions about the accountability of immigration enforcement and the rights of individuals caught in the system. Lastly, the U.S. has taken a bold step by revoking all visas for South Sudanese passport holders due to the government's failure to accept repatriated citizens. This unprecedented move has sparked concerns about the implications for those affected, especially as the situation in South Sudan remains tense. As we dive deeper into these stories, please stay tuned for more detailed discussions and insights. Yahoo US reports on a significant protest in Sackets Harbor, where approximately 1,000 individuals marched in support of a mother and her 3 children who were detained by federal agents. This emotional gathering was led by local residents, including 90-year-old Jane Jenkins, who expressed her determination to stand in solidarity despite her physical limitations. The community's outrage stemmed from the family's abrupt removal during a raid at a local dairy farm linked to an investigation into child pornography. Marchers carried signs demanding the return of the children and chanted slogans emphasizing the importance of due process, highlighting the impact of the incident on local schools and families. The peaceful protest, however, was met with a small counter-protest from Trump supporters, illustrating the deep divisions in public opinion surrounding immigration enforcement. The Associated Press highlights a federal judge's ruling requiring the Trump administration to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Judge Paula Zines criticized the government's actions, stating there was no legal justification for his arrest or deportation, especially given the risks he faced in a dangerous prison environment. Abrego Garcia had previously been protected from deportation by an immigration judge, and his case has sparked controversy over the administration's handling of immigration laws. The Justice Department's attempts to appeal the ruling underscore the complexities and errors in the immigration enforcement system, with officials acknowledging the mistake but struggling to rectify it. The South China Morning Post covers the troubling case of Joseph Tater, a U.S. citizen detained in Russia, who has been forcibly admitted to a psychiatric hospital while awaiting trial for allegedly assaulting a police officer. Tater's situation raises concerns about the treatment of individuals in Russia, especially those with political asylum claims. His defense lawyer has argued against the forced hospitalization, suggesting it is an attempt to isolate him from society. This incident reflects broader human rights issues, as critics accuse the Russian government of using psychiatric institutions to silence dissent and control individuals with opposing views. Tater's case is part of a worrying trend of Americans facing severe legal consequences in Russia, often under dubious circumstances. South China Morning Post reports that over 430,000 Hong Kongers returned to the city on the last day of the Qingming Festival long weekend, with a total of more than 550,000 people crossing the border. The Lowu control point saw the highest traffic, with over 100,000 entries, while heavy congestion was reported at the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, where drivers faced long queues. The government anticipated this peak travel day, adjusting staffing and resources at immigration checkpoints to manage the influx effectively. Travelers returning by air also contributed significantly to the numbers, with many taking early trains to avoid delays. RFI highlights French Foreign Minister Barrett's visit to Algeria aimed at resetting bilateral relations strained by migration and historical tensions. Barrot discussed an ambitious work program with his Algerian counterpart and President Tebboune, emphasizing the need for cooperation in security and economic matters. Following a recent conversation between President Macron and Tebboune, both leaders expressed a desire to mend ties, especially concerning the return of undocumented Algerian migrants. The visit also focused on the release of jailed writer Boualem Sansal, whose conviction has further complicated relations. With a shared goal of improving cooperation, both countries hope to address pressing issues together. The Sydney Morning Herald reveals that the coalition's plan to significantly raise international student visa fees could make Australia's application costs the highest globally, raising concerns about the implications for foreign students. Opposition leader Peter Dutton announced a cap on international student numbers, which critics argue unfairly targets aspiring students from less wealthy nations. The proposed fee hikes, particularly for Group of 8 universities, could discourage potential applicants and exacerbate housing issues, as students are often blamed for the crisis. Experts warn that such policies may push international students to more welcoming countries, jeopardizing Australia's $51 billion international education sector and its cultural diversity. Yahoo US reports on the recent primary election in Brevard County, where voter turnout was surprisingly low at just 21.7%. Despite predictions of an even lower turnout of 12% to 15%, the numbers still reflect a troubling lack of engagement from the community. The Republican primaries were fiercely contested, with Brian Hodgers and Debbie Mayfield emerging victorious, setting the stage for their upcoming battles against Democratic challengers in the general election on June 10. This lack of participation raises concerns about the community's interest in local governance, prompting questions about whether residents will show up to vote in the future. Al Jazeera highlights a significant shift in U.S. immigration policy as Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the revocation of all visas held by South Sudanese passport holders. This decision stems from accusations that the South Sudanese government has failed to accept the repatriation of its citizens, which Rubio emphasizes as a fundamental responsibility of any nation. The move marks a notable stance, especially as it comes during a time of escalating violence and political instability in South Sudan, where tensions are rising between President Salva Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar. The U.S. had previously granted temporary protected status, TPS, to South Sudanese nationals, shielding them from deportation, but this status is set to expire soon. RFI further elaborates on the implications of the U.S. visa revocation for South Sudanese nationals, framing it as part of a broader anti-immigration strategy by the current administration. Rubio's statement underscores the urgency for South Sudan's transitional government to cooperate with U.S. repatriation efforts, amidst fears of a renewed civil war in the nation. The backdrop of rising political tensions, including the recent arrest of opposition leader Machar, paints a grim picture for South Sudan, which has already endured a devastating civil war. As international mediators step in to avert further conflict, the situation remains precarious, highlighting the interconnectedness of immigration policy and global stability. Associated Press reports on the shocking immigration crackdown in Los Fresnos, Texas, where the beloved local bakery, Abby's, became the center of controversy after its owners, Leonardo Baez and Nora Avila-Gel, were arrested by Homeland Security investigations. The couple, legal U.S. permanent residents, were accused of harboring undocumented immigrants, leading to an outpouring of community support and protests from residents who knew them as helpful figures in the community. The arrests have sparked a debate about the limits of support for President Trump's immigration policies in a predominantly Hispanic area that had recently shifted towards the GOP. The bakery, a staple in the town, was not just a business but a gathering place for locals, and its closure after the arrests left many feeling a sense of loss and injustice. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation examines the investment strategies of Australia's Future Fund, particularly its significant investments in defence and aerospace companies amidst a global climate of rearmament. The fund's recent report indicates a remarkable increase in the value of its holdings in major weapons manufacturers, with notable gains in companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing. As geopolitical tensions rise, the Future Fund's choices raise ethical questions, especially in light of other sovereign funds that have divested from similar companies due to human rights concerns. The article highlights the balancing act faced by the Future Fund as it navigates the evolving security landscape while grappling with public scrutiny over its investment ethics. The New York Times discusses the Trump administration's decision to revoke visas for all South Sudan passport holders as a response to the transitional government's failure to accept deportees in a timely manner. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced this sweeping action, indicating a hardline stance on deportations that reflects the administration's commitment to strict immigration policies. This move, reminiscent of previous threats made against Colombia, underscores the administration's aggressive approach to immigration enforcement. Critics, including former Justice Department officials, argue that such actions unjustly punish innocent visa holders and reflect a failure of diplomatic engagement, highlighting the broader implications of the administration's deportation strategy on individuals and international relations. The Independent reports on how the Trump administration's aggressive deportation strategy against Venezuelan immigrants has been heavily reliant on tattoos as indicators of gang affiliation with the Tren de Aragua. However, many tattoo artists from around the world, including the UK and India, have spoken out against this misrepresentation, asserting that the tattoos in question often symbolize innocuous personal milestones or cultural references. For instance, one artist highlighted a tattoo commemorating the birth of a child, while another pointed out that a tattoo linked to the band AC/DC was erroneously classified as gang-related. Critics argue that the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has indiscriminately sourced images from the internet, leading to a flawed and misleading identification process that could unjustly affect innocent individuals. Yahoo US highlights a recent legal victory for immigrant rights in Florida, where a U.S. district judge temporarily blocked a controversial state law aimed at criminalizing undocumented immigrants. Judge Kathleen Williams ruled that the law encroaches upon federal immigration authority, as it imposes state-level penalties for actions that federal law already regulates. The decision came after a lawsuit was filed by the Florida Immigrant Coalition and others, asserting that the law violates the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution. The ruling underscores the ongoing conflict between state and federal immigration policies, particularly as Florida lawmakers have sought to align state legislation with stricter federal directives under the Trump administration. The Toronto Star warns Canadian travelers of increased scrutiny at U.S. border crossings, as the Canadian government updates its travel advisory to reflect the heightened examination of electronic devices by U.S. officials. Canadians are advised to comply fully with border agents, who have significant discretion in determining entry requirements. This advisory comes amid a broader climate of tension between the U.S. and Canada, exacerbated by the Trump administration's immigration stance and trade wars. Recent data indicates a decline in Canadian travel to the U.S., as many citizens express hesitance to visit a country where they may face stricter entry protocols and potential detainment, as illustrated by the case of a Canadian woman who experienced harsh conditions during her detention by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.